who's on the front lines? Matt Staver is. And so, Matt, God bless you. I love you, brother. I appreciate you so much for taking time to be on the call and participate in what we're trying to do here at Faith Wins. Man, have at it and share with these pastors, many of whom may need your services, brother.
Well, thank you. And we're working with thousands really right now of pastors around the country, all over the United States. Some of the states have lifted the restrictions, like Florida, Texas, and other states, North Carolina, Kentucky. Those have happened because of litigation, and other states as well. But there's a number of states where there's still a lot of lockdowns. Let me just begin by quoting something from the United States Supreme Court. It goes all the way back to 1947. It's when they first addressed the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. And they say this: neither the state nor the federal government, listen to this, may turn away anyone from going to church. They may not force them to remain away from church according to their will. They may not force them to remain away from church according to their will. And that's exactly what you're seeing happening with these governor and local executive orders all over the United States. Let me just give you a little bit about what's going on. First of all, let me just put out our website, lc.org, just lc.org. And we have a lot of resources there, but we also have a special website called reopenchurch.org, reopenchurch.org. And on that website, we have information about churches in terms of how do you begin the process of reopening church? How do you begin the process and do it safely with hygienic as well as other safety measures? And so we have information there. A mega church in Texas, Crossroads, took our information, they modified it. We have a 2-page document on that first page. If you click on it, and it goes through different points, but at the bottom of that 2-page document are some links to Crossroads Church, a mega church, and that gives you an idea of how one particular church took that and modified it for their own facility. They began opening on May the 3rd, and they're continuing to opening. Some churches are opening this weekend, and a number of churches around the country, including lots and lots of churches, maybe up to 3,000 or more churches on Pentecost. The last Sunday in May are opening, and that's happening all over the nation. So those are some ideas about how can you do it and still maintain your health and safety of all the different people. And you can do it much better than what we're seeing happening in the Walmart, Kmart, Home Depot, not to pick on them, but I mean, we all know that those are packed all the time, including liquor stores, even abortion clinics, but churches have been put to the back of the list in many of these states. So we are filing a case, a brief just in a few moments, few hours from now, so I'll have to leave in a few moments, on behalf of some Romanian churches in Chicago. And these really are classic examples of what's happening in the United States. For many of them, their first day of freedom was Christmas Day 1989, when Ceausescu where our chief litigation counsel, Horatio Mahet, grew up, and he was a 12-year-old boy on Christmas Day when he experienced his first day of freedom. Harry and his father, who was a pastor, many of these pastors that we represent, and many of these Romanian, they know what it's like to have pastors arrested and tortured, have Christians taunted when they go to school on Monday rather than Sunday, and put in the middle of a circle where the kids surround them and the teachers taunt them, and they call them Sunday keepers. They grew up with that. They looked at America. They looked at the land of the free. They saw that churches were full, and they dreamed of a time where they could come to America, and they did. And they became citizens of the United States, and they loved this country, their adopted homeland. And yet these same people in Chicago, these pastors that we represent, they've already been cited twice for disorderly conduct for conducting a church service, disorderly conduct just simply for opening your church. This past Sunday, because of the mayor and the governor of Chicago, they literally put no parking signs around a 9-block radius of all these Romanian churches that began to open 2 weeks ago, and they towed the residents' cars. One of the residents that lives a few blocks from the church is a nurse, came home at 4 a.m. in the morning. She came out at 7 a.m. to check in her car. Her car is gone. Instead of sleeping, buying groceries, whatever she needed to do, she had to now go find out where her car was, realize that it was towed, and pay the penalty. Why? Because they sent out a letter to all of the neighbors. The government did, all of the neighbors in a 9-block radius. And they said the reason why there's no parking is because this church, and they named the churches and they gave the address, were having services. We were very concerned that they were going to target the churches like what this church had happened to it in Mississippi that was burned down this week because of the rhetoric against these churches and the pastors there. But unfortunately for us, I should say, the neighbors realized that the problem wasn't the church. The church doesn't use the street parking anyway. They know that. They know it's from the government and it's from its heavy hand. So they support the church. When the government realized that they don't use the street parking, that in fact they use a parking lot that they've used for many, many years, in this one case, Elam Church, for 18 years, where they leased it right across the street, plenty of parking. They sent police cruisers there and they blocked the entrance to the driveway. Now, we have Facebook Live, and you can hear gunshots in the near distance that were actually happening. And instead of the police going over to where the gunshots were, they weren't regarding the church. It was in a neighborhood where you could hear gunshots, where something was going on. A couple of rounds of gunfire went off, not regarding this church, something else. But instead of the police there, they're blocking the entrance to this church so they couldn't come. And then they sent these pastors disorderly conduct criminal charges. That's unbelievable. In Illinois, the governor says that you can only have 10. And it doesn't matter whether you have a sanctuary of 50 or 5,000, it's only 10. And you're not going to ever get anywhere near 50 or more for another 12 to 18 months. And only when we have tracing, testing, and widely available vaccinations. And that's what he said. That's unacceptable. The government doesn't have the right, doesn't have the authority to dictate the form or the manner of worship. And that's what it does when it says that your form of worship has to be online as opposed to in person, and that you can only have 10 people, or in Maine, no people. We're litigating in Maine as well, where you can't have anyone. And in fact, you can only do online. We're also litigating in Virginia. The U.S. Department of Justice came in and filed a brief in our support. We defend the Lighthouse Fellowship Church. This Lighthouse Fellowship Church has no internet. There is no online option for them. Many of the people that come to the Lighthouse, they come out of prostitution or drug addiction. For them, their only family is the church. And for many of them, they are transported to their medical treatment. They're doing all kinds of things. This is their family. And so on Palm Sunday, they had 16 people in a 293-seat sanctuary. In Virginia, it's only 10 people. They were 6 people over the governor's magic number of 10. And as a result, the pastor was criminally charged with a misdemeanor, the penalty of which is up to a year in prison and a $2,500 fine. When this church then was confronted by these law enforcement officers, the other 15 people, in addition to the pastor being 16, they were told, if you come back on Easter, you will all be criminally charged. And consequently, what happened was they didn't have any Easter and there was no alternative. One final story I'll tell you is in Kentucky. On Easter Day, the governor there said that if anyone goes to a church, parking lot or otherwise, he will send the police and he will take down the license plates and he will give them notices of quarantine. And that's what he did on Easter, the Marysville Baptist Church. They had people in the parking lot in their cars. They did not get out of the vehicles. And the police came car to car, giving them notices of quarantine, taking down their license plate number. On Monday, because this hit the media that they got notices of quarantine for being in a church parking lot. They could have been in a liquor store parking lot just a few blocks down the road, or one of the super centers or big box centers, no problem. But because they were in a church parking lot, they had to get these, or they were given these notices of quarantine. And so when the media got that on Monday, Tuesday, when people went back to work, some of the employers said, aren't you a member of Marysville Baptist Church? And when they said yes, some of them were furloughed and some got immediate terminations because they were under the impression that they had some kind of disease, that they got quarantined. No, they were just in a car in a church parking lot on Sunday. The governor then sent a letter saying that they all had to go into self-quarantine, that they had to take their temperature at the same time every single day and report it to the county board of health, and they couldn't travel out of the county without government permission. And then he bragged when we filed suit that he will win. Well, he lost twice, and we won 3-0, 2 consecutive Saturdays in a row, where the court issued Saturday afternoon 3-0 decisions. In the first case, in favor of parking lot service. In the second case, in the favor of in-person services. They even quoted the scripture in this case, and they actually said, there is no greater risk to walk down the aisle of a grocery store than it is to walk down the aisle of a pew. And that there is no greater risk in getting a package delivered from a brave delivery woman than to listen to, and I love this, I'm not sure why they put this in, a stoic preacher. But in fact, it's a great decision for religious freedom. And again, the website to help churches in the process to reopen is reopenchurch.org. We're here to counsel churches and pastors all over the country, work them through the different situations. Let me end with this, Chad.
Okay.
There's a church in New York. They have a very strong restriction against churches. They decided to open up anyway. And on the Sunday that they were opened up, a man who had been contemplating suicide drove by that church. This just happened. Drove by that church, saw the church lights on, came in, got counsel from the pastor, and ultimately was averted in his direction to end his life over the depression that he was experiencing with the lockdowns. Churches are more essential than ever, and I just want to thank you, Chad, and all of you on here. God bless you, and anything we can do, we're here to help.
Matt, you're awesome, buddy, and I know you got to go and file another brief. Do you have time for one quick question
Sure,
for me?
Absolutely.
And by the way, y'all, Matt, I send out, remember doing that church do's and don'ts? We sat down in a place and you and your team wrote that out. We send that out to every pastor that gets on our calls, and it's gone nationwide to about 20-something different denominations. One question I had today as we're preparing for this, and there's one issue in Illinois where we might have lost a case, a church lost, and I heard from another legal group it was bad facts. Are you familiar with that? I know that's vague, and I didn't get
Yeah, it's the first case that was actually filed. We were the second case that was filed, and unfortunately, we had to file in the same district as the first case. In that first case, they didn't propose any kind of hygienic or social distancing. They just wanted to go back basically to normal, and that sets some bad facts. We had to file in the same circuit and the same district. But it is what it is. And so we're up at the Court of Appeals. So we're up there now with our case, and we're filing. Our oral arguments are already set for June the 12th. So they have really fast-tracked this. One of the things I will say, Chad, about voting, one of the things that we see as a consistent theme across the country, the most restrictive orders against churches are in states where that governor is very pro-abortion. And so if they don't respect life, they won't respect freedom. And how do we address this going forward? Certainly we do it in the courts, but we do it in the ballot box. We do it in the ballot box. And you see the places where these restrictions are being lifted. Well, guess what? Those governors in those states, they respect the sanctity of human life, and they respect religious freedom as well.
It's amazing how the lines are being drawn, Matt. And as you know, that's what we created Faith Wins as a 501c3 for, to maximize the Christian vote at every level, not just president, not just Congress, school board, county council. Man, God bless you what you're doing. Go stay in the fight. Know that we got your back. We're praying for you. I love you, brother. And have a great Memorial Day weekend, Matt.
You too. God bless. Thank you.
Hey, pastors, I've been telling you, you're going to want to be on this